We have an update to a story we exclusively brought you right here on CBS News 24/7. The wife of a U.S. Army soldier and Afghanistan veteran is now out of immigration enforcement custody after a month-long detainment. Daisy Rivera Ortega was detained during an immigration appointment in Texas, and she's been in the process of applying for a program designed to protect military spouses and parents from deportation. CBS News immigration correspondent Camilo Montoya-Galvez spoke to her husband, Sergeant First Class Jose Serrano, about the moment he saw his wife after her release.
Walk me through the moment when you saw your wife again for the first time in person outside of that detention center.
I think it was the same for both. She started running to me, I run to her, a big hug, kiss, and we both looking in the eyes.
All right, let's go live now to U.S. Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois. Senator, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it. So I understand you called the Homeland Security Secretary to ask for this release. What's your explanation for why you did that?
Well, I'm a veteran myself, and this was a piece of legislation that we worked on in the Senate that no service member should have their spouse or a parent deported while they are still on active duty. This is why the program exists, and she should never have been detained in the first place. She was actually at a parole hearing. She was doing what she was supposed to do, right, when they detained her. And so I reached out to Secretary Mullen and asked him for help and appealed to him, and I'm grateful that he reacted right away.
And Senator, I'm sure there are other cases and other military spouses dealing with something like this. Is there anything being done to make sure they're not being arrested by ICE? I mean, we have people who are serving our country and then their spouses are being taken away.
Oh, yes. Well, I know at least 3 other cases that we are working on in my office, but I take cases from all across the country. The veteran community and the military community knows that I take care of all of our military men and women veterans. So we get cases referred to us from not just my home state of Illinois, but all over the country. And this is something I'm very passionate about. Our servicemen and women should not have their loved ones deployed. And so, deported, and frankly, many of them are on their way to being deployed themselves, and their spouse is the sole caregiver for their children, and so this should never have happened. But again, I just want to thank Secretary Mullen for stepping in. He and I were texting back and forth late into the night last night, and we chatted this first thing this morning, and I told him thank you, but that this program needs to be really looked at so that we don't have any more cases like this.
I'm curious about what the secretary told you when you called him. Was he surprised to hear that this was happening?
He looked right into it, and he was very practical about it because he said, this should not have happened, and that he actually ordered to have her released the same day, and we were so happy that that could happen. But again, there are other folks who have been picked up. This should not have ever happened in the first place.
Yeah, and Senator, I want to shift gears here and talk to you about a different topic, because you're also calling for answers from the FAA regarding airplane testing that's almost 2 years overdue, and there are concerns about airlines being allowed to reduce the number of flight attendants in some cases. Can you talk about your concern about that?
Well, decades after it's been shown that the FAA cannot actually enforce the standard. It's an FAA standard that our aircraft should be able to be evacuated within 90 seconds. And we know that that is not happening. And so we called for them to redo the testing to show that, how much time does it actually take? Now there's a new ruling where the airlines are being allowed to reduce the number of flight attendants so that in an aircraft that has 2 aisles, in the back, many of the airlines are now only staffing 1 flight attendant in the back, so only one of the emergency exits is being manned. And that's really dangerous, and frankly, it puts the flying public at risk when you have to evacuate, from both sides of the aircraft. We just saw recently where this happened, right, where we had a pedestrian who climbed over the fence and was hit. The aircraft caught fire, and they had to evacuate the aircraft very quickly. I imagine that you're trying to do that, and there's no flight attendant to help open the doors in the rear at one of the major emergency exits on the aircraft.
We know Congress passed legislation back in 2024 mandating updated evacuation testing, but then that deadline passed nearly 2 years ago. Why was it allowed to lapse?
Well, this is the issue with the FAA is that they were, it's not so much a deadline. We passed it in the FAA reauthorization bill. They were in the process of doing this, and they need to come back to Congress. And in fact, the FAA administrator is coming to testify before Congress, and I'm going to have some very tough questions for him.
Yeah, and Senator, I understand you met with the Association of Flight Attendants. What's their response to all of this?
Well, they're gravely concerned because they're essential aircrew for the safety. I mean, the flight attendants are not on the aircraft just to serve you drinks and snacks. They're there for your safety. And their main job and their main priority is to keep the flying public safe. And so they're deeply concerned that there's an entire door on an aircraft with an emergency exit that will not be staffed at a time when, we see more and more cases where we have had to evacuate aircraft. And so they are deeply concerned, not just for their safety, but really their main job, which is the flying public safety.
Yeah, it all makes sense. Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois, I know you're a busy woman. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.